Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to Modality Monday. I have the great pleasure in interviewing my brother, my homie, my good friend, Tristan. Stay risen. Before we get started, you know how we're gonna start. We're gonna get hydrated because not a lot of us do that enough. So cheers, brother.
Hey, bro.
Yes, sir.
Salud. Salud.
Mm.
What kind of water is this, bro?
This is some medicine water, Kangen water. For the folks at home, you guys know I talk about it a lot. It's got electricity in it, super alkaline minerals. It's medicine water.
Nice, bro.
Yeah. So I'm excited for today's Modality Monday. It's a topic that I've wanted to speak on for a while, and I had someone reach out and actually ask me to speak about this topic. And I thought no better way to dive into this than with my brother, Stay Risen. Risen is a psychedelic embodiment coach. He's focused on merging medicines, psychedelics, with self-help techniques. And his journey, from what I know, has been super amazing. He's super trustworthy, super transparent, and the work that he does is super healing, and he works with a lot of people to help them with their mental and their healing. So we're gonna get into it. My brother Risen. So I know for the people that don't know, you have a personal development company, brand, business, Stay Risen.
Yeah.
What was the concept behind that? How did you get started with wanting to merge self-help with psychedelic healing?
That's a great question, man. Stay Risen was birthed from my experience with anxiety and depression over the years, and when I started experiencing high levels of anxiety and started having panic attacks, I was experiencing daily migraines to the point where I was carrying ibuprofen 800 on me all the time.
Wow.
And my migraines would get to a point where I was at school and I would be scared every day because it was every single day that I would get a migraine because it would the only solution I could find was sleep it off. And or take the ibuprofen, and at that time I didn't want to be so dependent on pills, and so it was getting to a point where I was going to need surgery on my jaw because I was experiencing clicking,
Clenching while you were sleeping.
Yeah, clenching. So that was linked to stress, and then not speaking my truth, and then with that, it started leading me to looking for ways to find self-healing. And when I went to the hospital when I had some water in my lungs.
Wow.
Pneumonia. And so when all these experiences were happening really quickly, I started really asking myself, how can I heal myself naturally, and how can I start developing more fulfillment and more purpose? And then so those transformations led me to self-help and personal development. It started leading me to looking more into plant-based living, into yoga, into meditation. And when I discovered philosophia, the love of wisdom, things just started really aligning for me as a Sagittarius. Sagittarius energy in itself is philosophy and searching for knowledge and questing. And so when I found that philosophy was a thing, a study, I was in love, and it was this is what I'm going to do. And so I share all that to get to a point where I started already doing work on myself.
Right.
Music became a way for me to go within myself and journaling. And so as all this was happening, I started doing personal development. I started working on music. I started journaling. I started practicing yoga and meditation. I started learning more about philosophy. It finally got to a point where one of my YouTube mentors, Leo Gura from actualize.org, I was watching his videos and tapping in and doing research, and he started talking about utilizing psychedelic medicines for personal growth. And in those videos, I started then asking myself, I think this is the time. And so I already had 7-8 years at the time of using cannabis. And so my experience with altered states of consciousness was based on my cannabis use. And since I've had such a spectrum with cannabis of like really great like blissful experiences to some like fuck, not the best, what I would consider not the most blissful or the best experiences, I had a lot of discernment going into the medicine. And then so my first mushroom trip was such a powerful experience for me that at the time I had the Rise Collective and the slogan was Stay Risen. I was already starting this like brand, this like kind of way of me wanting to share information, education, that my mushroom trip was almost like my heart had all these layers, and it was like the mushrooms came and they were like, hey, why don't we take those away, and why don't you now feel what it really feels like to feel alive.
Wow.
And what it really feels like to feel love. And I want you to feel it so much that that's all that exists. And so tears were coming out. I was laughing and crying at the same time. All these insights and realizations. Time wasn't even relevant. I was just in this such profound state that I remember drawing things and writing things down, that the only thing that I was like keeping and taking away the most from that experience was like, this is possible. This is here. This profound level of peace is possible, and I'm experiencing it, and I had this experience, and I don't want to forget that, and just go back to just going back into my thoughts. And so the idea of staying risen was held for me, and all I could repeat was like, I just need to like stay risen. And I had a deep resonance for that. Like staying risen. And then that became a mantra for me. And then holding that mantra for myself, that became a mission to help others tap into that same mantra of knowing that if you experience anxiety or depression, that for me it was a misuse of my imagination. And then so learning how to use my imagination and my ability of foresight, and knowing that these states are accessible just as easy as the anxiety is accessible, is how I can also access bliss and joy. And it was just a matter of maintaining sustainability, harmony, and balance within myself to keep that consistent. And that's what Stay Risen became for me, and is and continues to be for the people.
Wow. That's so dope. That's so beautiful, bro. That's so beautiful. So the medicine kind of was the gateway to, hey, there's this other side, and yes, you don't need to eat us all the time to get there, but this is what you can have, and it just helped you unlock that part of the mind, or that part of the imagination, like you said. So what was it that, like, how did you get to that first experience? Was it hearing your YouTube mentor talk about, hey, psilocybin mushrooms, or whatever information you heard? Like, what was the journey to get to that stage of first trying the medicine?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of it was inspired by Leo's videos on using psychedelics for personal development and shifting the stigma. I was also watching other YouTube kind of like creators. I was doing my own research, and also a lot of it was like intuitive. It was almost like I kind of knew what I needed to do and knew what I was like preparing for. And for me, it was like I was listening to a lot of Alan Watts, and so I had a lot of like philosophical kind of like remembrance within me. And then the biggest thing, two things that really like just was like, I need to do this now, was Alan Watts said, a man who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except his own thoughts, and so therefore he lives in a world of illusion, never fully here in reality. And it's not his exact quote, but it was like along those lines. And so that really hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, have I just been living in my own illusion, in my own like my mind and reality?
Thinking too much.
Yes. And so that was like really an opportunity for me to be like, it's time for me to like do something about this. And the second thing was letting go, and like just let go and just surrender. And just hearing that, and like hearing more of allowing myself just to like, even though I don't know what's on the other side, I can let myself go. And I read this book of Zen and creating and creating a living. It's this book by Lawrence Bolt, and he shares the 4 archetypes. One of them was a hero, and it says like a hero is okay with not knowing because he's open to the discovery of the journey. And so both of those were just like moments of like, I don't really know what's gonna happen after I take this. There's a lot that can happen, but I'm gonna surrender it and I'm gonna let go. And then so what I did was I created like a ceremony for myself. I had a trip sitter. I was fasting. I made some ginger tea to help support the experience. I made such a safe environment for myself.
This was your first?
This was my very first mushroom trip ever. Yeah,
that's so dope. You're intentional with it.
Yeah, and I made sure like I told my family not to disturb me because I was still at my parents' house at the time. And then so I had all these signs around me. Like I wrote down like surrender, like oh, you're loved, you're safe, all is well, don't worry, so I put all these things. I put pictures of my family around me to remember like I'm loved and I'm not alone. I had crystals and stones, things that were sacred to me with me. I had a journal, I had coloring books, I had water, I had snacks, and I don't know.
Yeah, something going on in the bedroom, boy.
Yeah, I had all of it set up so that when I took the medicine, I was ready to let go, and I had everything that I needed to support myself. I also had a music playlist. I also had like a TV in case I wanted to watch something or something needed to be like transmitted. And so me doing all that was really focusing on my intention, on what my intention was for this medicine, which was for me to let go and for me to receive what I need to see. And second thing was in honoring the set and setting, honoring where I was at mentally and emotionally, making sure like I was prepared physically as well, and then also my environment. In many cases, they say like usually we dream what we seen the day of or before, right? Like if we watch a scary movie, our dreams might be inspired or influenced by that, right? We do things in the physical, then our dreams are inspired by that. Well, it's also important to approach the medicine that way too, of like if we prepare ourselves and what we're seeing, hearing, and watching, and who we're with, our experiences before the trip, then the trip is going to be influenced by that, right? And then so that was part of my intention as well, was like I didn't listen to any music lyrics. I was really mindful of what I was watching. I was really just more in nature and just getting myself ready for the dream or for the trip to have it be influenced by that.
The journey.
By the journey.
Exactly. How much did you take? How much did you sit with on your first?
3.5 grams.
Took it 3.5, also an eighth. From what I know, that's a very, very good dosage to tap into, and it's very. It takes you to that point. And something that I found absolutely amazing, that for your first journey, the fact that you did the research so that you knew what you were sitting with and stepping into, because I know for a lot of souls out there, a lot of people out there, maybe these kind of medicines are presented to them in like the party scene, party kind of way, and they fail to realize that these sacred plants, this sacred medicine is just that, it's medicine and not to be played with. And I think it's absolutely amazing that you were able to acknowledge that and set all the intentions that needed to be there for this journey so that you could get the healing out of what you needed. And I think that now that we see certain states, certain places legalizing medicines like psilocybin mushrooms, we understand now that there is healing in these tools. And like we talked about before, it's just kind of a gateway or a bridge to here. This is a bridge to that mindset of getting out of the imagination that is hindering you and into the imagination that can better your journey.
Yes.
And I think that's super powerful that was your first experience.
And if I may speak on that as well, one thing I've learned along my path is that there's an opportunity for us to remember there's no right or wrong. It's just kind of what we're choosing to create for ourselves. And part of like utilizing the medicine is that there's different ways we could utilize the medicine as well. I remember reading, I can't remember his name right now, but this an amazing kind of writer who writes on 5-MeO-DMT, and what he wrote really took away, or I really received, was that like there's 5 different modalities of using medicines. You know, the first one is for sensory awareness, you know, like enhancement, better said. You know, we might take psychedelics or medicines because it enhances our senses, right? Which is why we see them at raves and at parties. So, wow, you know, we're tasting food differently, visuals start to shift and enhance. The second thing can be for just psychedelic exploration. It can literally be because you're a psychonaut and you just want to explore the realms of psychedelics, and that could just be your intention to kind of see what's out there, you know, and like see where it takes you, right? The third one is a therapeutic approach, where it's like you're in a clinical trial, or it's kind of more for like therapy, and like you're in there because you're working on certain challenges, and that's really supportive. We're seeing that now, more of MAPS doing more clinical trials, and more individuals open for things like PTSD, working with anxiety and depression. The fourth one is like shamanic healing, where now we're bringing in more of a spiritual aspect to it, if anything, more ceremonial aspect to it, where now individuals use these medicines to connect with their ancestors, to connect with different kind of spirits in the spirit realm, and then work on healing in that way, which is really powerful and really beautiful, and I highly encourage. And then the fifth way is, as he mentions, a not so common approach, but is like what he would say is the most important one, and that's to achieve states of non-duality. And to achieve states of non-duality is almost like being able to flip a switch of going from our dual aspect of reality to then completely shutting down the DMN, losing complete aspect of self, and then going into the space of non-duality where all is one, and then being able to access that with the intention of like, I'm going to experience non-duality and go beyond the self. And so all those 5 are just different ways and paths of using the medicine, and none of them are right or wrong. And I feel like it's just really honoring where you're at and where you're calling in. And for my experience the first time, it was definitely more in the space of like the therapeutic kind of intention, where I knew I was like wanting to work on things, and I knew the medicine was going to help me. And then so I went in with that approach and created an environment for that, you know. And so I think it just offers a versatileness of how we want to work with the medicine, and also honoring that it's sacred,
right?
And it's been in our ancestry, and it's been in part of many cultures for thousands of years,
hundreds of thousands of years. And specifically psilocybin, I wanted to talk about because I know how healing it is, and it's the one medicine that doesn't need to be manipulated. It just grows and it's there. You know, certain medicines like maybe ayahuasca or LSD, like, so when we talk about ayahuasca, there's a process to create it. We talk about LSD, it was man-made, and it's only got a DNA of about 70 years. Psilocybin has a DNA of hundreds of thousands of years. We know that our ancestors were using it to connect to their ancestors and travel around in different realms. Why? Because they have depictions of it. And if you look at certain statues and monuments around the world and certain structures, the majority of like the major structures are like spiritual religious structures are in shapes of mushrooms. And to me it's almost like ancestors or powers that be are trying to tell us that, you know, this could be again some type of medicine to sit with to unlock certain certain energies for yourself. One thing that we had talked about before the video, there's 2 things I want to ask you. I'm going to go to this one first because the second one I feel like is going to be a little elaborate. What was your experience your first time as far as like sensory, like, so for someone that's never sat with medicine like the psilocybin, what was like your visual, you know, how you talked about the senses are more they're more sensitive.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
I like this question because I get it. I think it's a very common question. People want to know, like, well, what's it like?
Right.
You know, like, what do you see? You know, and like, what did you feel? You know, what did you experience? And like, it's subjective for everyone, and there's also common themes that are kind of like noticed and observed within these experiences. For me personally, my first time sitting with the medicine at the dosage of 3.5 grams in tea form with that intention, The visuals, there's two main ones that pop out to me. One was like, I remember like there's a window on my door, and like it was like evening time, and I just remember seeing like it go dark and the sun coming out, and then going dark and the sun coming out, and going dark and the sun coming out. And I was just like, how many days has it been? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like it's been a week or like 2 weeks. And as they started going, I had my trip sitter kind of like ask like, yo, like how long has it been, you know? And it was really grounding to hear it's been only 20 minutes. And it was also really mind-blowing. Like, whoa, I got a little scared for a second. Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, how long am I stuck in this forever? Right. So I was seeing things like that. I remember at one point we put on Rick and Morty, which is like, wow.
That must have been intense.
And I did see like RGB, like red, green, blue. I was almost seeing like the colors of RGB, almost like I was able to see the perception of the colors of the screen, and it was like the most trippiest thing watching Rick and Morty on the Medicine. I was like, what type of show is this? And what am I seeing right now?
Seeing the real stuff.
Yes, I do also remember like my hand morphing at one point. I was going like this, and it was like thin, long, going slower, almost like I could see my fingers like multiple fingers kind of like moving, and I almost felt like I had 7 fingers at one point, and so those were some experiences like that were just surprising in those moments and in those states where I was in it. But that's kind of where I got to with that dosage.
From what I understand, it's probably not the best to look at body parts or faces necessarily when you're in a journey that deep, because it could throw you off a little bit. But if it's something that like you're experienced with and can handle it, I would say for your first time, try to stay away from the visuals of bodies and faces, because I know that it can kind of trip you out a little bit. And there's you had said we had talked about there's no good or bad. we had talked about there's no good or bad before you had mentioned that, and even for what I know, people have sat with the medicine and talked about bad trips this or bad trips that. From my understanding, there's really no bad trip. It's a lesson, and it kind of allows you to understand that if you maybe had a certain experience at that time which you would deem as bad, knowing that you can come out of it. And honestly, and almost like relating that to life, any bad thing that you go through, at the end of the day, more often than not, you're going to come out of it stronger because of simply just having that experience. And then knowing how to move through it and having an understanding of, okay, I did that, but I made it out. What do I learn from it, and how do I avoid those mistakes again? So I think that's very important to know.
Yeah, for real. If I may speak into it really quickly, it's really valuable to know that beforehand, because 2 things. One, when you're in it, you got to remember, like, when you're in it, you're in it. And it's like, it's going to feel like it's bad. It's going to feel scary. It could feel very anxiety driven. It could feel very overwhelming and difficult. And so having the proper navigation techniques and like modalities like breath and knowing how to relax your nervous system, like these things are essential, I feel, when you're starting to get a bigger dosages. Having kind of groundwork done does make a huge difference. Like already having a mindfulness practice, already doing yoga, having the body relax, already kind of like going into your dieta, like knowing just how to relax and how to calm yourself down is really essential and can be a game changer when and if those moments happen. The second thing is then to also start to look into the integration of those experiences and like what they're teaching you and what they're showing you, right? I had someone I was working with tell me her experience was that she was laying in her living room, and from the side of her eye she was seeing this like dark thing crawling on the wall, and in her experience she was like, nope, like that's not real, I'm not gonna look at that. And it was like getting closer and closer, and her heart started to beat, and she didn't want to look at it, and she was like, nope. She was just trying to focus on like what was happening in front of her. It got to a point where it got so close to her, it got right next to her ear, and she looked and she screamed and she was freaking out. And then since then she didn't want to sit with any medicine. She was like, nope, never again, like I'm not gonna take that again. And so our work was then inquiring about where in your life are you afraid, what in your life are you afraid of seeing, what could that have symbolized in your life or your experience that can represent something you're avoiding or you're not wanting to look at. And we got to a point where we got deeper into an experience she had of abuse, and experience she had that was representing that memory and that recollection of that trauma. And then so it's highly valuable to look at those experiences and then look within your story about how and why is this manifesting, right? Because psyche means mind, delic means manifesting. So psychedelics manifest what's in our subconscious and meets the conscious and subconscious. And then so what we're seeing is what we're projecting. And then so it's an opportunity to look into that and then integrate it.
Psyche is mind, delic is manifesting. Yeah. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Mind manifesting.
Man, I've never gone back in a Modality Monday and took notes, but I might have to go watch this and start taking notes. And that's very important to understand that. Again, we talk about the medicine is healing, and it's gonna meet you wherever you ask it or wherever you are in your journey. And that experience with your friend, the girl, and having to sit and understand what was that message that was coming to me. Yeah. The medicine's always going to give you a message. And man, we're past the time that I thought, but this is so amazing. this one is dope. We had talked about before about ego deaths, and Tristan had kind of broken down to me the science behind it, which I know I'm going to butcher right now, but we had talked about the lowering the activity in your DMA.
You want me to speak on it real quick?
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
When I tapped into this, it just gave me a lot of grounded awareness of what I was putting in my body and why I was putting in my body on a more kind of physical level. And so basically what's really cool is the research that's been done specifically on LSD and psilocybin is that they found that it works similar to SSRIs, which is antidepressants, in the way in which they work similar but they're different. What happens is that they omit 5-HT2A serotonin receptor, also known as serotonin 2A, which there's a bunch of 5-HT2A in our prefrontal cortex. So we have our prefrontal cortex, our limbic system, and then our stem brain. And our prefrontal cortex is kind of responsible for decision making. It's kind of where our cognitive functions are located and how we are able to make decisions, And then so what happens when the 5-HT2A is stimulated through the psychedelic medicine is that two things happen. The first thing that happens is the BDNF, which is the brain-derived nootropics, and then that basically is brain growth, miracle growth for our brain, as we were speaking on, and then that basically allows and supports things like memory, activity, growth, and connections, and so specifically connections and growth. And so it's growing our brain, is growing those connections, and that's the BDNF. The second thing that's also happening is that it's also increasing the transmission of glutamate. And then what happens when the glutamate transmission is increasing is that then that is what's supporting things like cognition and memory and recall. And then so it's a neurotransmitter. So glutamate is a neurotransmitter responsible for memory and for cognition. And so not only is it miracle growth for our brain, but it's also supporting us in memory and also in learning. And so what's really cool about all of that is that it offers us an opportunity to rewire belief systems, rewire different neural pathways. It helps us go from what, for example, for anxiety, for specifically what I've been and working with, is that anxiety can be looked at as a disconnection from the moment and also a set of belief systems, right? A set of belief systems are also known as a paradigm. And so when we have different paradigms in our lives, all they are is attitudes and mentalities. And so in order to have a huge mental shift, we got to rewire our belief systems, BS, it's a belief system. And so what the medicine does is that it helps us be able to create new belief systems. Something that goes from I have anxiety, I overthink, is a belief system which creates a paradigm, which then creates a reality.
Right.
And then so what it offers us is that I'm present, I'm here, I don't have anxiety, like it's not my identity. It takes us away from the identity of these things, and then helps us in a level of rewiring our brain to then believe it and then become it and embody it. And so it's really fascinating, and it's really supportive in like what's happening. And then ultimately, final thing is that it also leads into lowering the activity in our DMN. And then so that's what you're speaking on, is the DMN is a default mode network, which is kind of like where the idea of self, if the idea of self was somewhere in our brain, it would be in the DMN.
The ego.
The ego, right. And that's like, daydreaming, self-inquiry, thinking, imagination, like all that is like in our DMN. And so it lowers the activity in the DMN, and at some dosages and points completely turns it off. And then when that happens, that's the ego dissolution, also known as the ego death, where the idea of self no longer is there, and where we have these experiences where people are talking about feeling connected to awe, where there's like, wow, I just felt like I was everything. I felt like I was just connected to the awe, or like there was no me. And like, that's why sometimes it's hard to explain it, because it goes also beyond duality, and it becomes this powerful experience, right? So
that is literally mind blowing. What I got to kind of simple, to make it a little more not simple, but another way to look at it for people out there is like, your brain is constantly doing this construction on the highways in your brain, right? And you got the workers, the cells, the electricity nodes that are always like trying to connect things. And it's like the 405 in California. There's always construction going on. There's always these traffic jams, right? So sometimes that's where the headaches, the anxiety, depression comes in. And what the medicine does, it's almost like this technology that, we've never seen before. And it tells all the workers on the highway, get out of the way, and comes through and just connects the highway, clears the highway, so more cars, more downloads can go through. Yes, and exactly. I think that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and especially for those of you who experience high levels of anxiety and or depression, it's just like an overly active highway, and also known as an overly active DMN. And then so in lowering that activity, and also even at some points turning off or closing the highway, it gives you a space to then remember that, wow, peace and profound presence is obtainable and accessible to you. And then starting to then notice those habitual responses of how we then tend to like overfill the highway and then ask for more cars to come in. And then so it gives us an opportunity to then gain control again of saying, actually, let's put some like yellow lights and stop signs here, and like let's recreate the system so it's more efficient. And that's been really supportive for me in working with the medicine for anxiety and depression, and it's reworking my system and habitual ways of being so that it supports a more efficient way of me experiencing reality in life.
Drop the mic on him real quick. Man, my brother right here, man, always just with it's just the way you speak and the way you explain things is poetry. It's so beautiful. And me and Tristan are getting the flow. And whenever we connect, literally whatever I'm going through, like I don't even explain to him really much of what I'm going through. Like we'll say what's up, how's it doing, and he'll look at me, tap in, and just give me some mathematics to meet me right where I'm at with the things I'm going to. And I'm just like, whoa, bro. It's like he like would hit the telepathy on me real quick.
Resonance, bro.
Yeah, the resonance, the stay risen vibes. You know what I'm saying? So just real quick, we're gonna wrap it up. What advice would you give someone seeking to try the medicine, or was kind of in the process of you were looking for healing, or maybe just they hear about mushrooms, psilocybin. We for those that don't know, psilocybin is the main, what would you say, the main ingredient in mushrooms that gives you the mental juice, if you will. What would you say to somebody that's looking to try?
First thing is follow what I created a 5-step protocol for embodiment. And this protocol is what I share with my clients, and what I always come back to, and what I always support people in. And it also adds on to like the 5 steps for like beginners if you're just starting the path. And the protocol is like 5 stages of spiritual embodiment and working with the medicine, and it follows like the Stay Risen protocol. So the R, the I, the Z, the E, and the N. And the R is for remembrance, the I is for integration, the Z is for Zen, the E is for embodiment, the N is for normalization. And so it always starts with remembrance, and that's what the medicine does for us. It reminds us of what we forgot. It reminds us that we're not a story, that we're not our beliefs. It reminds us that we have the opportunity to rewire things. It reminds us of the peace that's here, that's accessible. And so the remembrance is always like that. Wow, like that's right. Like, I remember that, you know, like
I've been here before.
Oh my God, the material, you know, so the remembrance is cool because everything feels so clear.
Right.
When you're on the medicine, it all feels so clear. It all feels like, oh, wow, this is what I have to do. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do my yoga. I'm doing my meditation. I'm gonna hang out with my friend. And then so what happens is that because it gives us this peak experience, we eventually come back to our baseline vibration, our baseline state of consciousness, which is where most people tend to fall back or don't know what to do afterwards. And then so that's why we get to the second phase, which is integration. Integration then is more like conceptualization and actualization. It's like, okay, well, what does this mean for me now? I realized that the reason why I had anxiety was because I tend to be on my phone a lot, and I'm like, my diet isn't too great, I haven't really been working out. Awesome, you realize that in the remembrance part. Now the integration is creating a strategy and a plan for you to then now make actual change. Is that all right? Cool, I'm gonna work for trainer, and I'm gonna actually like start seeing what I can start cooking for myself. So the integration is strategy, and the integration gives us more of a conceptual space to get to actualization, right? The Z is like Zen, just presence. It's more of like beingness. It's like, cool, you got into like this is what I'm gonna do, this is my plan. Now you gotta just be present, and then that naturally leads into the E, which is embodiment. Do the work, chop wood, carry water. Usually is what happens after and before the medicine. Just chop wood, carry water. At times, just do the work and just show up.
Just show up for yourself.
Create consistency. Be disciplined. Do what you know you need to do to get to the end. And the end is the normalization of your new baseline. The end is like, this is now going to be your new normal. Well, where you were a month, 3, 6, 9 months ago is going to be a completely different person because you followed the steps, you knew what you had to do, you created accountability and structure and support to get to where you are now, months down the line, which then follows, and what I always share in the beginning, it's like, to get to the journey, right? That was like in the journey. Before all of that, right? You go into your setting, your intention, you look into your dosage, what you're going to sit with, you're going to look into kind of your preparation for your dieta, what you're eating in a day, 3 days before, what you're watching, cleanse things out, and then you follow the integration, then you follow those 5 steps. So I would just highly encourage all of that, and also community and support, coaching and mentorship. Nowadays, we're in a time, bro, where like there's microdosing coaches, there's psychedelic integration coaches, there's kind of, there's communities out here, there's courses. Like now, there's more opportunity than ever before to receive support in this area, to receive guidance, to receive a structure in how you could utilize this medicine to really support you in your healing and your transformation. And so I would highly have people start there. Start with your intention and creating a support system that is going to support you along the way.
Powerful. I like how you mentioned the things that you're watching before sitting with the medicine, and from what I understand, cleansing and juicing and what like there's a real light before, so the medicine can really sit with you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Super powerful, super amazing. My brother Risen with a story. You can find him on IG at Stay Risen. It will be in the comment section. And if anyone has any questions about, medicine, psychedelics, or looking for someone to help guide you with your experience, please feel free to reach out to any of us, or either of us. Any of us, there's a community out there for you, and I'm just very thankful for you to be able to share the knowledge and the wisdom that you've intake on your embark embarkment with all this. So
thank you for the opportunity. We just launched our one-on-one coaching mentorship program for integration and embodiment, and so we have 3 spots left available for that. We also have season 2 of the Portal Cast, which is our podcast, coming out in a weekish or so, and a soundtrack attached to it. And then we're also getting ready to just launch our community in our academy. So there's a lot of different resources available to you. You can check out my link tree and just stay in connection. There's a lot of spaces here.
How do people tap into the first season of the Portal Cast?
It's on YouTube, Stay Risen. So you can go on YouTube. All 21 episodes are live streamed on YouTube. And then season 2 is going to be the first season that's going to be on Spotify.
Nice.
And on YouTube.
Okay.
So just type in Stay Risen anywhere.
Stay Risen.
Yeah, I would like to guest feature real quick, little Jack right here.
Hey, our buddy right here.
He's been with me on a lot of journeys and trips.
Yeah.
He's familiar with the rounds.
Always nice to have some comfortable, beautiful, comfy energy with you.
Yeah,
you know.
And also thank you, man, for being and spearheading opportunities like these for your community, for those tapping in, and for being a leader and a way shower. You know, it's really inspiring, and I acknowledge you and take this moment as I and Jack appreciate your presence and opening up the space, and I'm grateful. Thank all of you for tuning in, and thank you guys for tapping in, listening, and being open to listening.
Very thankful for you, brother. And thank you for you guys tuning in and checking in. Definitely going to be a part 2. Definitely going to be a part 2. This is super powerful, and thank you. So hope you guys have a great start to your week. Great week. I'll be posting this on my Instagram and YouTube. I'll put all the stuff on my Instagram so you guys can check out and follow through. And stay risen, be more, and we either have our dreams or we live our dreams. And there's lots of medicines to help us start that journey to live our dreams. And you have all you need. You just have to sit with yourself and trust yourself and reach out to others that can help you. So peace out. Peace and love.
Adios. Adios.
Peace.